Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're doing something absolutely fascinating. We're taking a massive, sweeping, philosophical vision of the world and funneling it right down into hyper-practical, everyday life strategies. If you've ever felt totally stuck in a rut or paralyzed by a massive to-do list, well, This Explainer is exactly what you need.
Have you ever wondered why something as incredibly mundane as updating your resume or finally cleaning out your garage can feel just as terrifying as facing down a fire-breathing dragon? It sounds completely absurd, right? But that feeling of overwhelm, it's intensely real. So, we're going to unpack exactly why your brain reacts this way, and more importantly, how to systematically disarm that fear.
Okay, let's dive right into this. Here's our roadmap for today. First, order, chaos, and meaning. Second, mastering the daily grind. Third, cleaning up the past. Fourth, breaking down overwhelming goals. And finally, building long-term momentum.
Part 1. Order, Chaos, and Meaning. The Metaphysics of Experience.
So, there's this fundamental Taoist view that all of human experience is essentially broken into two inevitable realms, what we know and what we don't. On one side, you have order. Order is your security, your predictability, your mastery. It's the known. But on the flip side is chaos. Chaos is unexplored territory, it's pure potential, but it's also terror. It's the unknown. And what's absolutely crucial to grasp here is that our nervous systems are literally biologically wired this way. We respond with a deep sense of security to the known domain of order. Conversely, when we hit the unknown domain of chaos, we react with either paralyzing fear or, if we can muster the bravery, curiosity.
Which brings us to a fascinating core thesis. You experience the positive meaning that lightens up your life when you're standing on the border between order and chaos. Think about that. True meaning, optimized learning, real personal transformation, that only happens right there on that fragile edge. Because if you retreat entirely into the safety of order, you actually kind of become a tyrant. You freeze your own growth, and you often end up forcing your own rigid rules onto everyone else. You've got to step out onto that border.
All right, Section 2, Mastering the Daily Grind, the Math of Repetition.
Let's bring this down from abstract philosophy into the concrete reality of everyday life. 7,500. That number is honestly staggering. If you have just 3 intimate, positive interactions a week with a long-term partner, that adds up to 7,500 interactions over a 50-year relationship. You know, we tend to obsess over grand vacations or rare life milestones, but our lives are actually constructed from these tiny repeated moments. This really proves that focusing on small daily habits is what builds massive long-term momentum.
For example, think about the transition of coming home from work. That might just be 20 minutes a day. But if you do the math, 20 minutes a day over a standard work week equals roughly 5% of your entire waking life. So here's the crucial takeaway. If you can perfect a simple 20-minute daily transition so that it isn't miserable, you just fixed 5% of your entire lifespan. Imagine if you fix 20 of those habits. You've practically fixed your whole life.
But, how do you actually start fixing them? The psychologist Carl Jung had this brilliant insight. The fool is the precursor to the savior. Meaning, to master these massive, repeating daily events, you have to humbly allow yourself to do them terribly at first. You gotta be a fool before you can be a master. Just let yourself stumble forward, do it badly, knowing that eventually you'll get it right.
Moving on to Section 3, Cleaning up the Past, Confronting Unresolved Chaos.
So what if the thing stopping your daily grind is actually something pulling you backward? Think about an unresolved past failure. Maybe you dropped out of a degree program when you were 95% finished. That unresolved chaos is going to continue to paralyze your confidence in the present. Memories of past troubles actually haunt us involuntarily. Your brain knows you fell into a chasm, and because you never mastered exactly why you fell, your psyche is basically screaming warnings that the exact same danger is lurking in your future. To stop this, you need a structured workflow to clean up past mistakes and career obstacles. First, acknowledge you fell into a chasm. Second, figure out why. You have to determine your own role in the failure. Look, even if a bad relationship or a failed job was 95% the other person's fault, you have to figure out your 5% so you never repeat it.
And sometimes, that unresolved chaos manifests physically right in front of us. Finding your resume on a hopelessly messy computer desktop is often the very first dragon you have to fight. I know it sounds funny, but it's deeply true. A disorganized computer is often just a reflection of a disorganized psyche. The sheer dread of simply searching your hard drive can literally trap you in a job you absolutely hate for decades. Which leads us to Section 4, Breaking Down Overwhelming Goals, the Workflow of Progress. So how do we slay that dragon without getting burned? Well, we need a step-by-step guide for breaking down big, overwhelming goals. The trick here is to systematically shrink massive, daunting tasks until they simply aren't terrifying anymore. This is the micro-progression of the job hunt. If you're completely paralyzed by fear, your contract with yourself should look exactly like this. Step 1, just open the laptop. Step 2, look at your CV without editing a single word. And step 3, pat yourself on the back. You literally must shrink the task to an embarrassingly small piece. And crucially, never ever punish yourself for making tiny progress. Don't sit there and say, oh, I should have done more. No, celebrate that small victory.
And if you're still feeling afraid of the job hunt, let's do a quick reality check to take some of that pressure off. The baseline failure rate for submitting a resume is about 95%. That's just the reality. Many job postings are just corporate formalities, or they're internal. Rejection is statistical. It's rarely personal. So, knowing this, shrink the goal. Send out just 1 resume. Then next week, maybe 3. Build up to 10. Let the statistics work for you instead of taking every single rejection straight to heart.
Finally, Section 5, Building Long-Term Momentum, the Matthew Principle.
Now, once you start taking these embarrassingly small steps, something truly incredible happens. It triggers what's called the Matthew Principle, where success builds exponentially. The first attempt usually yields pretty low success, but by the third attempt, it spikes dramatically. It's like once you make your first million, the next million is way easier. Or once you write your first resume or book, the second one is infinitely faster. If you just allow yourself to start slow, you will inevitably accelerate.
To really lock in that momentum, here's some highly practical parting advice from the sources. First, when a boss or a mentor asks you to do something, try to treat it as an opportunity, not an annoying obligation. Second, toot your own horn. Doing a genuinely great job completely invisibly is a terrible strategy. Visibly communicate your value to your employers. And finally, use targeted behavioral rewards. Kind of like how B.F. Skinner trained pigeons with specific rewards, you should specifically praise good behavior in your household or your workplace. It instantly establishes harmony and encourages repeated success. We've covered a whole lot of ground today, all the way from the metaphysical boundary of chaos and order, right down to organizing the messy files on your desktop. So I want to leave you with this provocative thought. What overwhelming task can you shrink down to an embarrassingly small step today? Find that tiny edge of the unknown, allow yourself to be a fool for just 5 minutes, and take that step. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and I can't wait to see you next time.